All right. So let's see. Is my volume okay? All right. Yeah, it is. All right. Cool. Cool. So, I'm not expecting anyone to be on. I know it's been a while since I've actually done a live stream, and I know it's a awkward time in the day. Early morning for me, late time at night for other people, and other people it's in the middle of their workday. So, I don't really expect anyone to be in, but if someone pops in, all right, cool. But let's go ahead and talk censorship. So, I've somewhat covered this a little bit in previous videos, but usually it was covered in passing. I think that it's kind of important to go ahead, especially in the situation that we find ourselves in nowadays, to go ahead and discuss what exactly censorship is, what its effects can be, so on and so forth. So, um, obviously, from what I just said, pretty easy takeaway. Censorship has many different forms to it. The censorship that most people are used to is, like if, you know, genitals are shown or something like that in a show, like maybe something from a foreign country and that sort of thing, where that sort of thing isn't a big deal. But then in America, we're kind of prudish about that shit, and so yeah, we go ahead and just uh, we go ahead and we censor it. Either we cut out the scene or we blur it, whatever, whatnot, or maybe crop that section off. So now I can kind of understand that. At least they have some level of reason behind it. It comes down to a it comes down to an important social aspect, more of a cultural one, really. But then you've got the more nefarious ones, the ones that don't have a good reason behind it, or what people will say is a good reason, but then they decide then that it's there's a good reason to censor even more and even more and even more, and pretty soon you're not able to say or do anything without their express say so, which they can go ahead and take away at any time. Um, that is an issue with censorship, and that's kind of the way that we're going right now. They say that the road to hell is paved with the best of intentions. And this is true. Like, when people suggested, censorship and that sort of thing, I guarantee you that the initial people that were all like, yeah, that's a good idea, weren't sitting there and thinking, ha ha ha, this will allow us to control the population. And that they're not going to go ahead and be thinking that. But there are people out there that think that way. And unfortunately, those people tend to be the ones that crave power. And the ones that crave power are the ones that you've got to watch out for. Now, when I think of censorship, I think of it in all of its forms. Like I said, there's some reason for, some censorship, and I understand it. But we've gotten to the point where censorship is running rampant, and there's absolutely no reason. Like, go ahead and take Twitter and Facebook. Why are they censoring anything having to do with conservatives during this election? I mean, they are censoring a lot of shit. Hell, TikTok is even censoring some stuff. but I think that might be just a few rogue people. But Facebook and all that are censoring a lot of crap, like even stuff from like Fox and that sort of thing. I mean, at least YouTube, with they can go ahead and have conservative news stations, and at least they don't censor their shit. They censor it from third parties. So I mean, at least they're at least trying to hide it. But whereas with Twitter and Facebook, at this point, they're not hiding shit. It's pretty fucking blatant. And at this point, if conservatives win, I would definitely recommend that the conservatives go ahead and take away the open platform moniker that these motherfuckers have been hiding behind to get through legal loopholes. Because they, at this point, are acting very much so like people that like production companies. Production companies do not get to ignore the law. They don't get those special loopholes, whereas an open system does. Because their argument was, hey, we're not controlling what people are saying on our platform. We shouldn't be held responsible for it. And I agree with that. If you actually have an open platform that you are hands off on, unless something blatantly illegal is on there, like child porn or snuff films or something like that, all right, yeah, you have to go ahead and take those down. But like, if someone says a naughty word, you, as an open platform, do not get to tell them, oh, you don't get to say that word. Oh, no. So, at this point, the government really needs to tell these companies, look, either you truly become an open platform, or you lose your immunity. That needs to fucking happen, because that will put a very quick stop to this partisan bullshit. Because if they're picking and choosing what can and can't be said on their platform, what talking points can be brought up and all of that, well, then you got to go ahead and just say, no, I'm done. You got to say, at some point you have to draw the line and say, look, if you're not going to go ahead and act like an open platform, you're going to act like a publisher, then we're going to go ahead and treat you like a publisher. That means you are now held responsible for everything that is said and done on here. So if someone gets hurt because of stuff and all that, now you're held responsible. That will put a quick damper on that, because if you look at companies like TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, there's a lot of stuff that people are espousing and suggesting and all that leads to people actually being hurt. Now, I personally don't think that any company should be held responsible for it, but it's the way that the law is set up. And at this point, the law has a major loophole in it when it comes to political discourse. A company should not be allowed to silence political discourse, yet claim to be an open platform. That's absolutely ridiculous. And they try to hide behind, oh, well, this is bullying and that sort of thing. It's all like, the people that espouse conservative stuff get dogpiled on constantly. And then their video gets taken down, but none of the videos that were telling people to go dogpile them and threatening them and all that, none of those videos get taken down. So if it actually had to do with bullying and not blatant censorship, then the result would be reversed. Those videos proposing or espousing conservative points would be the ones that remain, and the ones that are telling people to go and dogpile, the people that actually do go and dogpile, all of those accounts would be gone, banned under the bullying rule and stipulation. So, what gives? It's censorship. And this is a hard type of censorship. Again, it's the same as, blurring out no parts when, a foreign movie is shown or whatever, whatnot. Okay? That's, that's another hard censorship. Another hard censorship is when CNN loses connection, when they're losing a debate. Okay, whatever. Or when they, suddenly shut off cameras at like one of Trump's rallies, or they all of a sudden can't cover an empty Biden rally, whatever. And I'd be calling them out if the situation was reversed as well. Anyone who's watched my channel knows this. I don't play favorites when it comes to this sort of thing. But when I see that hypocrisy, that's when you've got my full attention. All right? So, you got hard censorship. But then there's other types of censorship. You have censorship through fear, where that's where you have the saying the silent majority, because you've got these people that are high up in corporations that happen to have a liberal bent or whatever, they own a business and all that, and for some reason they're allowed to fire someone for disagreeing with them politically, even if they're not discussing it at the job or anything like that. They're able to look at this person's social media and go, oh, this person doesn't agree with me politically. I'm going to end their livelihood. Now, I've always said that businesses, companies, corporations, and all of that absolutely need to be held to the Constitution. And at that point, they would be in violation of it. Because it doesn't sit there and say that you have to hire someone that has a different political bent than you. You don't have to. But it also says that you're not allowed to, that the government isn't allowed to go ahead and, or anyone in power, which is what it was initially saying. Because when this initially happened, even businesses had to abide by it. Somewhere along the line, they stopped having to. But the reason why it was put that way was because we didn't want people in this country to feel pressured into a certain religious belief or, a certain political stance, whatever, because we had just fought a fucking war to gain our independence, to put an end to that shit. Like, I've known several people that have been fired for being Christian. That is bullshit. And they weren't even like the type of Christian that was all like, I have to have Sundays off because my religion says so. They weren't even that. They were willing to work Sundays and all that sort of thing. So if they're willing to work on their religious Sabbath day, I don't see an issue. There's no reason to fire someone based off of their religious beliefs. Just like there's no reason why there's no reason to fire someone for their political beliefs. Now, if they're rambling on in the business about it, and they're making customers uncomfortable and all that sort of thing, all right, fine, I can understand that, because now this is hurting your bottom line and that sort of thing. You pull them aside and you say, hey, you cannot do that while you are here. Fair enough. But you should not be able to fire someone because they made a social media post. that disagrees with your political beliefs. I believe that a company should not be allowed to monitor their employees when their employees are off the clock and then take away their livelihood if those employees do something that they consider stepping out of line. This is absolute ridiculousness. And it makes people afraid to voice their opinions. And then you get silent majorities. And then you get polls that are way the hell off. And then all of a sudden you get people that are absolutely shocked because one group was supposed to win by an absolute landslide as far as the polls were concerned. And then it did not happen that way. So, if it's not happening that way, you have to ask why. And people, said, oh, well, there must have been a silent majority. It's all like, okay, why was there a silent majority? Why would these people, when they're being polled, lie or refuse to be polled or whatever? You have to ask yourself that. And I can tell you right now, as far as conservatives are concerned, the reason why they've been so hesitant to be out in the open up until recently is because they've been afraid of being fired. They've been afraid of losing their livelihood. They've been afraid of being blacklisted, being persecuted by the government. But apparently that's starting to end. And again, you have to ask, why? Now, is there still a risk of them being fired? Yes, there is. But as it is right now, a lot of the jobs, because of these lockdowns and all that, people lost their jobs and they're not working. So what do they have to lose? I mean, eventually they're going to go back to work, but when you're in a dire situation, you're not exactly thinking about the future. Humans don't function like that. So, yes, you have all of these different methods of censorship that are coming to the forefront, but it's really not mattering too much except on social media. Because with social media, these companies know that they have a lot of power. They hold a lot of sway in the discussion, and a lot of people are communicating online, more so than ever before, especially with the whole COVID situation. So, you've got all these people communicating online, and these social media companies are able to censor in a completely unchecked way, and they're able to restrict the flow of information. And they're restricting the flow of information regarding a presidential election. Now, that is a big fucking problem. At that point, I would say that borders on or crosses the line of election tampering. Especially because these companies are operating under them saying that they are an open platform. You are not an open platform if you are actively censoring things that are not actually breaking the law. So banning, again, it comes back to hard censorship. Let's go ahead and talk about a form of soft censorship. Soft censorship is a censorship that isn't exactly enforced necessarily. Not like with YouTube or Twitter or anything like that, where you're actively being forcibly silenced. It's more coercive than that. It's the fear of what might happen. Take a look at with YouTube. That big ol' yellow demonetization button, that's got a lot of people fucking scared. At least the ones that make their living on YouTube. Because they're getting hit. They've seen multiple channels get hit with that heavy demonetization. And it's not even like they're sitting there and saying, oh, well, this specific video is demonetized. Entire channels are getting demonetized, like all of their videos. Like they could sit there and make just a couple of videos that piss someone at YouTube off, right? But all the rest of their stuff is, neutral and that sort of thing, no terms of service or anything like that. Yet all of their videos, or even the vast majority of their videos, except for their oldest videos, the ones that aren't necessarily getting views anymore, so they're not going to make any ad revenue off of it. All their new shit, which is going to be the things getting the views that they would be making money off of, suddenly can't get ad revenue. Well, this ends up being another problem in and of itself, because if someone's made their living on YouTube and now they can no longer make their living on YouTube, what does that mean they have to do? That means they have to go out and get a job. Now, a lot of people, don't think that a lot goes in to making YouTube videos and that sort of thing. I can tell you right now, going through and editing videos and that sort of thing takes a long time. And that's with me doing the absolute bare minimum. Because not only do you have to record the video, but if you're going to be doing editing on that video, now you got to go ahead and put it into the editor, do all your shit, which can take anywhere, from an hour to several days of work to go ahead and do, especially if you're doing heavy editing. Like if you got the Markipliers and all that, they're able to hire people for it, but that's still man hours. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and that time equates to money. Because if the person's spending time doing that and not going out and working some corporate gig, then that means they're not making that money that they would be making from that quote-unquote steady job. So if they're not making the money from that steady job, then that means they're investing their time and energy into this, hoping that it's going to pay off and at least match that. In all honesty, they're hoping to exceed it, but early on, they're just hoping to match that, to be able to continue living based off of the money that they make. Well, that is a real incentive at that point for people to shut up, to not speak the uncomfortable truths, to not call out shit that needs to be called out, to not say the thing that might be unpopular. The reason why is because if they get demonetized, they lose their livelihood, and now they got to go and get a job, and they can't put that time and effort into their videos anymore. And if they can't put the time and effort into their videos, then the quality's going to slip. And if the quality slips, then they're going to lose viewers. They're going to disappoint people. That's the reason why I like doing live streams, because you guys get it raw. It saves me a bunch of time and effort. All I have to do is go through and talk and interact with you guys when you interact with me in the chat. And I love that. Because it also keeps me from having to worry about cost of time versus the possibility of demonetization. Now, I don't monetize my channel, obviously. But even if I did, I would at least be able to go ahead and do these. But it would make it so I wouldn't be able to invest a lot of time and energy into making, highly edited videos. That's just how it is. And don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people that would ever think that I could make a living off of YouTube. Because the things that I talk about, some of them actually don't go within the community guidelines. A lot of stuff that I talk about is taboo. You're not allowed to talk about it. Which is fine, because I'm saying what I feel needs to be said, what needs to be discussed. But I mean, it is what it is. What I want, as far as censorship is concerned, is, yeah, you know, go ahead and remove the crap from the internet, like child porn and all that. That there's no place for that on the internet. Fair enough. But what we need to do, and again, this is a cultural problem, and unfortunately, it's a cultural problem that's stemming from the United States. This is our fault. And it's because of this. I'm not going to sit there and say special snowflake attitude, because, like, I mean, that's such an easy cop out. And it goes deeper than someone being a special snowflake. Someone being a special snowflake is just another symptom of the problem. At this point, we punish people for being strong. Showing any modicum of strength. So, to address the censorship issue, we're going to have to go ahead and address the underlying issue. And that is the rewarding of mediocrity. People being told that well enough is good enough. No, it's not. You scraping by is not enough. And this is coming from someone who actually has very, very, very few real needs or desires. I live a very basic life. I don't need the biggest and baddest thing. I don't need a huge house. I don't need some super fancy car. The one thing that I go with extravagance on is my computer, but that's because so much of my shit has to do with the computer and how well it performs. That's my major thing. But you've got people that, want super fancy, they want super fancy cars, big houses, yachts, long fucking vacations all around the world, all that crap, pie in the sky bullshit. And that's how they judge someone's success. Someone's success should be judged off of how happy they are in life. How truly happy they are. Because someone can sit there and tell you that they're happy and be absolutely fucking miserable. And no, I'm not just talking about people that have severe clinical depression. I'm talking about your average everyday person. Your average everyday person doesn't know what actual happiness is. They don't know what they fucking want. Not until they see it. And when they see it, usually at that moment, they don't know that they want it. They only know that they want it once it's no longer available to them. And that causes this stupid ass feedback loop. And it just absolutely wrecks people. How many people do you know? Like, you might even be one of these people. How many people do you know that most of their time, if they're griping about something, it's about lost opportunity? saying, oh, when I was younger, I could have done this, I could have done that, I should have done this, I should have done that. And then look at what they do to other people. When they see other people doing what they want, and it's not really affecting them at all. Like the individual that's observing this, not affecting them at all, right? But then they go out of their way to tell that person that they're stupid, that they're wasting their time, blah 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 blah. Not only because is it something that that individual doesn't want to do, but it's also coming down to some sort of deep-seated jealousy. If someone's making a living doing something that they love and they're not miserable in their own skin, then you get the Karens that are coming in and saying, oh, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to say that. Blah, 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 blah. You need to be canceled. And unfortunately, the Karen types right now are the ones that are very much so in charge of a lot of social media companies. They think that it's their job to socially police people, and it's not. It's society's job to socially police people. But you can't do that on a social media app, especially something where you've only got a minute to talk, or so many characters to get your thought out there. You can't have a nuanced discussion there, but a lot of people don't understand a nuanced discussion anymore. When I'm talking to people out on the street, it's like they want a full conversation discussing philosophy and economics and all that. They want it all condensed down into 5 minutes. And they want all the answers. And if you don't cover something in that 5 minutes, then it doesn't exist, or you're purposely avoiding it, blah blah blah. Really? Really now? No, it's because there's a time limit. And the thing is there's so much information here. There's so many different points of view that you have to be able to assess it all. And then if you're wasting time trying to be politically correct, or not say something that could go ahead and give this person ammunition to come after your livelihood, that's even more time that you're not being able to convey information. And that's also limiting the information that you can convey. And that does no one any favors. Ever. Limitation of information is always fucking horrible. And I'm not just talking about the quote unquote useful information. I'm talking about information that makes you uncomfortable. A lot of people don't consider that information useful because they actively push it out of their mind. They actively try to forget it or ignore it because it makes them uncomfortable. And people have gotten so complacent nowadays that they think that words can hurt them, that words are harm. I'm going to tell you this right now. Me sitting there and calling someone an asshole has yet to kill someone. And people are all like, well, emotional harm is harm. No, it's not. Not unless you are weak. Only the weakest people will be harmed by an insult. And one of the ways that you become that weak is by being sheltered and coddled. Like what these social media companies are trying to do to people. And then you hear questions of, well, why is it that, conservatives, do all this hard shit? Why are they the ones that tend to go into law enforcement? Why are they the ones that tend to be first responders? Why are they the ones that, tend to be farmers and so on and so forth? The reason is because conservatives for a very long time, this is not a new thing, this is not a recent thing, have been having to deal with the slings and arrows from the left. And I'm not just saying liberals, I'm even talking about people that are centrists that lean left. Because when people, talk about conservatives, usually in their mind, like people on the left, when people talk about conservatives, when they say conservative, in their mind, they have, Bible thumping, backwoods inbred, as the default. Here's a news flash. The vast majority of conservatives are intelligent and compassionate people. They are the ones that typically don't judge someone based off of what they are, but by their actions. I mean, is there going to be a little bit of judgment there based off of what someone is? Yeah, but I'm talking about career choice. Like, conservatives tend to look at strippers and go, oh, well, there's the bottom of the fucking barrel right there. Why? Because how much education does it take to be a stripper? It doesn't. You just have to look good. And if you've ever been to a strip club where it's the B squad day, that doesn't necessarily hold true either. But I mean, that's an extreme example. But most conservatives, if they see a black guy walking down the street, they're not thinking, oh, that motherfucker stole something. No, 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 no. They don't think anything of it. They don't even notice that guy because they got their own things that they're worrying about. Now, if they see a black guy walking through a neighborhood where they know no black guys live, and he's walking through with a fucking hoodie on, with his hood up, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders up, and he's kind of half crouch walking, that's going to go ahead and get some heads turned. But you know what else will get a head turned? A white person wearing the same fucking shit. Although I think that it's funny that a lot of the gay communities are full of people that say they're of a liberal bent. That's fascinating to me. And yet the liberals are the ones that are sitting there and saying, oh, redistribution of wealth. It's all like, okay, have fun with that. You're going to be giving conservatives a lot of fucking money. Yeah, some conservatives are going to lose money, but it's going to be mostly liberals that lose that fucking money. So I don't understand why these motherfuckers are sitting there and saying, yeah, this is a good idea. Like, I really don't. And I think that it's absolutely fascinating now that they're trying to censor people who are talking basic economics. Like, people that aren't even talking about, anything controversial. I mean, economics is not a controversial thing. All economics is about the flow of money in a society. I don't see how that can be considered controversial. I don't get it. I'm sorry I've gone off on several tangents here. I know that it's a little bit that they've been a little bit longer and more frequent than usual, but there's a lot that I want to talk about, but I really do want to talk about censorship. And I have talked about it a little bit, but the thing is there's so much that comes along with censorship, both as far as a root cause of it and then the consequences. And it's hard for me to not go off on a tangent. Here's my basic take on censorship. Censorship should be as limited as humanly possible. Now, I understand that society's going to have some things that they're going to want censored because they're not going to want the kids to see it, whatever. But y'all know my take on that. I really don't think that kids should be overly coddled. I don't think they should be shown pornography at the age of 5. No, that's a liberal thing. They're the ones who want to show little kids porn. I'm a centrist. So I don't go like off the deep end if I hear of a teenager looking at porn on the internet. It's gonna fucking happen. And if it doesn't happen, then that means they're looking at someone naked IRL. Now, which one of those could result in pregnancy? I'll just put it that way. But I also believe in age appropriateness. Not as far as sexual relationships are concerned, or even basic relationships, because you do have a power dynamic that does happen there, and some coercion can happen, and some bad decisions can be made based off of lack of experience, as well as based off of just sheer ignorance or immaturity. So I do not agree with the new California law, which it was censored. Like, as someone who lives in California, I can tell you this right now. That bill, almost nothing was said about it. And when you heard people talking about it, very few people were allowed to talk about it. And the only ones that were allowed to talk about it that weren't absolutely head over heels for it and spewing absolute bullshit about it, completely misrepresenting what it was, were the ones that a lot of people are all like, oh, this is a conspiracy theorist. They let them say it, which is another form of censorship, and that is selection of information outlet. Because you can go ahead and let information out there, but if it's coming from a source that is so discredited that no one will believe it, and it will actually cement in their mind that this must be untrue, then that's an excellent way of blocking information, because then people are going to be like, no, I'm not even going to look it up because I know it's not true because this motherfucker was talking about it. And a lot of people forget that even a broken clock is right twice a day. So, that's basically censorship through subterfuge. Because they're lying when they say that only these sources are releasing this information and talking about this information. But at the same time, they're allowing the information to get out there so that people won't believe it. Therefore, undermining our ability to make an informed decision. I honestly do not believe that any of these social media companies should have the authority to censor. If they're going to go ahead and run on the premise of being an open platform, they should be forced by government to be an open platform. And yes, I am saying that in this instance, I agree that the government should have a say in private businesses. Because I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, they're a private business, until a private business does something that they don't want, and then they're all like, well, that should be illegal. Oh, my Jesus Christ. See, with me, I'm naming specific businesses, and it's good, and it goes both ways. Like, if there was, like, let's say TikTok was to start censoring liberal views and liberal videos, I would be saying the exact same thing. Period. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever for people to censor other people's ideas. Whether you're on the left or the right, whether you consider the idea as good or bad. Doesn't matter. But as I've said in previous videos, there's only one thing that I believe that should be limited as far as freedom of speech, and that is someone espousing or suggesting that freedom of speech should be abolished or further limited. That should be the only limitation. And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of people out there that are sitting there and saying, oh, well, it's freedom of speech for me to sit there and say that freedom of speech should be abolished. It's all like, you raise a good point. This is a giant weakness in the free speech extremist argument. Because it's only a matter of time until some nasty, foul, underhanded tactics are used to go ahead and get enough people, 51% majority, to vote to abolish freedom of speech. And if that happens, there's no going back. Because then no one will be able to argue in favor of freedom of speech. And there's a lot of people that are like, well, that's what the Second Amendment's for. I would like to avoid a bloody civil war, if at all possible. Although right now it's looking like the Civil War has already started. But I'm talking for future reference. The Second Amendment should only have to come into play under the most dire of circumstances. And we should try to avoid those circumstances and block those circumstances from coming true as much as possible. I know there's some people that are going to agree emphatically with me on that. There's some people that are going to be neutral on that thought. And then there's going to be some people that are blatantly against it. A lot of the people that are going to be blatantly against it, there's going to be two categories. You're going to have category one, which are the free speech extremists, that think that if you suggest that there's any limitation on freedom of speech, that you do not agree with freedom of speech at all. And I disagree with that. Especially since I'm saying this one thing needs to be limited to protect freedom of speech. Not to protect people's feelings, but to protect freedom of speech itself. I do not believe that there should ever be such a thing as hate speech laws. Because that is limiting freedom of speech a lot more than sitting there and saying you are not allowed to say that freedom of speech should not be allowed. Because if you say that, we're going to apply that rule just to you. So you no longer have freedom of speech, so you cannot say that. Give them an instant taste of their own medicine. But then you're going to have the second person that's going to definitely disagree with me saying that, and that's the person that's suggesting that freedom of speech should not exist because they know that that is a checkmate to them. The people that are neutral on it are all like, oh, I can see both sides of it. All right, fair enough. I don't mind that. I am often a fence sitter myself. Sweet. And then the people that will agree with me are the ones who understand the importance of that First Amendment. Because with using the First Amendment, you can take the stuff back typically. Maybe hard, but you can do that. Once you fire that bullet from the Second Amendment, however, kind of hard to take that back. Unless you're going to go digging through the other person's skull. But quite frankly, I also believe that corporations, if they're... Like, I really don't believe that a corporation should be considered a separate entity. I do not believe in that at all. It's a conglomeration of multiple individual entities, and it should be treated as such. But I do believe that it is the responsibility of the government, because of the power in this country that these corporations hold, that businesses hold, they need to be held to a higher standard. So yes, I do believe that a business should not be allowed to look at someone's social media posts. And if they are caught doing so, I believe very, very heavy fines and sanctions should be in place. And I also believe that they should be forced to pay that person in damages to their privacy. And I'm talking large sums of money to make it to where if they're going to be doing it, they got to make absolutely certain that it's worth it. There's going to be some people that are all like, well, they might need to know if they're giving away trade secrets. That's what PIs are for. They want to go ahead and spend the money on a PI. All right, fine. But they have to be able to defend it in a court. Because if they sit there and say, well, we thought this person might be sharing secrets, it's all like, all right, why would you be thinking that? What gave you reason to think that this person was doing that? Because last time I checked, we're not Korea. Last time I checked, employees are not the property of the business that employs them. Last I checked. I don't think we're that bad yet. But another reason why we're in this situation where censorship is so prevalent is because there is a very, very hefty imbalance of power in the educational system. Now, the educational system is funded by taxpayer money. And I believe, as such, schools should have to remain neutral. They should not be allowed to put political bent in any lessons at any point whatsoever. That means no extra credit for going to a Black Lives Matter protest. That means no bonus points for going to a specific political rally. No docking of points for going to specific political rallies or social gatherings. No kicking a kid out of class because he says, actually, this study says this. At that point, if you are kicking a student out of class for having done their research on the subject, you, as an educational facility, as an educational facilitator, and as an educator, have failed. And you do not deserve to continue to educate. Another group that's been censoring a lot of shit and lying through their fucking teeth? The CDC. The FDA. And they need to be held fucking accountable for this shit. We can't hold WHO to account because it's an international corporation. But what we need to do is we need to expose all their fucking lies and put that shit on repeat for the next, 5 to 6 months. Be all like, this is what they were fucking saying. This is the reason why all this shit fucking resulted. And it was all because of their fucking lies and their cover-ups and their bullshit. We need to stop listening to the World Health Organization. They have been corrupted by politicization, and they need to be ignored. If there are doctors that actually want to be listened to, they need to start doing independent studies, and they need to be able to bring proof forward. I do not believe in any way that people should be allowed to go into the scientific field and then completely ignore the scientific process, or be able to tell people that another study is irrelevant, not based off of, hey, we were able to disprove this or we weren't able to replicate this, but just because it's inconvenient. At no point should a scientist say, because I said so. If a scientist of any stripe ever gives the argument of, because I said so, I will never respect what they say again. I'm not saying that they should be censored. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be allowed to spew their bullshit. What I'm saying, though, is that the people that disagree with them should get just as ample of time to bring in their arguments, their evidence. And I don't think that's unfair of me to say. Both sides getting to talk? Who knew? Oh my goodness. What a novel concept. Not censoring information because it's not politically expedient for you? Oh my goodness. Or hell, socially expedient. Because I'm sorry, I believe that if someone is a danger, an active danger that you can prove, yeah, that information shouldn't be censored. Then on top of everything else, I do not believe that you should be able to take away someone's livelihood just because they said something you don't like. I don't believe that corporations should be able to spy on their employees during their off time. Hell, the government isn't even supposed to be allowed to do that. We know that they do, but they're not supposed to. At least there can be some action taken against the government, but there's no action that can be taken against over meddling employer. And all of it leads to a silent majority where everyone's always shocked whenever it's all like, oh, the majority of people actually believe this when behind closed doors. But then you also get situations like with the current political situation where people thought that Hillary was supposed to win in a landslide, and then when Trump won, all of a sudden you got people screaming, not my president, that sort of thing, and then you get a giant fucking witch hunt going on that claims the professions of multiple fucking people, drags everyone's name through the fucking mud, and just absolutely makes us all look like idiots. And now you got people sitting here and saying that if Trump wins, that they're going to go ahead and march. And then you've got the other side, which is all like, hey, we've already seen all these issues with fraud happening, and there's plenty of proof out there, but you guys are trying to cover it up. Why are you trying so desperately to cover it up? We can't trust that result, so then we're gonna march if our guy doesn't win. And it's like, censorship has everlasting ramifications, and at this point, I don't really think that it should be that hard to argue that censorship is bad. Name any point in history where censorship ended up actively and ended up helping for the long term. It helps in the short term, and it helps one side of any argument. But then once everything does eventually come to light, all of a sudden, heads roll. It always ends up in absolute violence. And I don't understand why people are trying to say that censorship is good, that censorship is justified. No, it's not fucking justified. There are plenty of people out there that say stuff that I think is the dumbest shit ever to have been conceived in the history of humanity. And even with those people, I still say they should be able to talk. They should be able to speak freely. It just amazes me. And if I have enough patience, me of all people has enough patience to say, yes, these people should be able to talk, even though everything that they say infuriates me because of my extreme allergy to single brain cell thought, that should say something. I am not known for being the most patient person in the world when it comes to stupidity. I'm not. But I believe that even the stupid should be allowed to be stupid. They shouldn't be punished. Nature is going to punish them enough throughout their lifetime. We don't need legal ramification. We don't need monetary ramification. But I'm just saying, stop. We need to get the censorship to stop. To try to avoid future violence based off of ignorance. Because that's what censorship always leads to. It leads to violence based out of ignorance. Now, there's plenty of valid reasons in the world, both talking about nature and also talking as far as cultures are concerned, where violence is somewhat justified. You know, defending yourself. Most cultures agree, yeah, you should be able to defend yourself if someone's attacking you. Some cultures, not so much. But nature always agrees, yes, you should defend yourself. It's the reason why it's kind of why your fight and flight instinct is wired the way that it is. But all throughout history, it's been very looked down upon as far as using violence for political gain or social gain. And that's cross-cultural. A lot of cultures are sitting there and saying, no. Like, you sitting there and killing off your competition, we can't wait for you to die if you're doing that. And there's a reason for it. Because that sort of shit leads to true oppression. I mean, go ahead and take a look at the beginning of Soviet Russia. Look at the atrocities that happened there. And everyone was trying to justify it. Not only to themselves, but to other people. No one bought it. Even the highest up people knew, hey, this is kind of fucked up. Maybe go ahead and censor what's going on. But there were a few brave souls that actually distributed that information to other people. And that brought about change. Change right away? No. But that's because it was so muted because of the censorship. And as a result of censorship, hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people died horrible deaths that didn't need to happen. Because I don't know about you, but starving to death is definitely not on my top 10 list of ways to go. Having my friends and family disemboweled in front of me, and then watching the group turn and come toward me, again, not in the top 10. I'm just saying that anytime you look at censorship throughout history, it has never ended well. The only time where government censorship, I believe, is okay is if there is an active war going on And people are trying to report on what the government's next move is going to be. They should be able to report on the results after something is done. And even then you can sit there and say, well, this is how they reached the conclusion that this was the best course of action. Okay, fine. But reporting on something that's being planned in a military sense, all you're doing is putting those men and women's lives at risk. All you're doing is making it so it's harder for them to do their job and come back safely. You're also endangering civilians of wherever that's happening at. Because a lot of these fucking groups that we end up fighting have no problem sacrificing civilians, hiding in them. Making it so we would have to wipe out a bunch of civilians to take out one or two of them. But if they don't see it coming, they don't have time to disperse out into the crowd. They have no clue that it's coming. And it saves multiple lives on both sides. And not to mention, an enemy getting hit hard enough and fast enough, there's actually a pretty good chance that they'll just surrender, which then stops the bloodshed. But if they know you're coming, then they're going to be mentally prepared for it, and it's not going to shock them. And so then they're going to be less likely to surrender. They're going to be more likely to dig their heels in and fight and fight and fight. Even if they're all like, all right, yeah, we're going to lose, but we're fighting down to the last man. All that's doing is upping the body count. And real life is not Call of Duty. A higher kill count is not a good thing. Not when you're in real life. But now we're not talking about something that's happening over in some foreign country where we don't know the names and faces of the people that are fighting. Now these problems are starting to come to our country. It's happening here, right now. These riots are just the beginning. It's going to get worse. And at this point, from the sound of it, neither side is going to accept the outcome of this upcoming election. Because if Trump wins early, Facebook already said that until all the mail-in ballots are counted, they're going to censor people saying, hey, Trump, got this many votes. They're going to censor that. My question is what else are they going to censor? And even if the situation was reversed, I'd be asking the same thing. Even if the person that I wanted to win was going to be on the beneficiary side of this, I would still say, why is this a thing? Why would you do this? That is active censorship of the American people expressing themselves. That blatantly goes against what the First Amendment is about. And I'm sorry, if these social media companies cannot be held to account with as much power as they have, because these social media companies, take a look. A lot of major changes that have happened because of social media. That's them overpowering the government. That's them holding sway over the government. That means they need to be held to these same standards. That means they have gained so much power that they need to be held to the same standards that the government has to follow, laid out by the Constitution. Because we've seen what happens when they're allowed to go ahead and censor whatever they want. And then get taken over by one side of the conversation. When people are allowed to let their feelings guide the course of what everyone else can say. And there are people that are sitting there and going, oh, look at the conservatives. They're trying to say that they're oppressed. They are being oppressed. They're being told that they don't have the right to speak their mind. They're being told that it's perfectly acceptable for them to lose their job, their home, their land that they've worked their entire lives for, have their families torn apart, and be ostracized by society, but then be told at the same time that they are the oppressor as they have everything ripped away from them. The Conservative Party is not a party of oppressors. Everything that the Conservative Party has been passing and been advocating for only expands freedoms for everybody. But I've been looking at everything that the left has been saying, and it's all limit this, don't allow this, ban this, stop this, blah, blah, blah. It's always putting limitations on people. Last time I checked, an oppressor does not give you more freedom. They limit you and limit you and limit you to control you. And the first thing that they limit is your information that you are allowed to obtain. Usually that's at the same time that they limit your voice. Because I'm looking through every instance of a group of people being oppressed. The first thing that they're told is they're not allowed to argue with it under penalty of violence. And the U.S. government, basically any government in the world, not just U.S. government, but especially the U.S. government, they derive their power from us telling them that they can use force to enforce the laws. A law is supposed to be a social rule agreed upon by the governed, enforced at gunpoint by the government. That is the essence of what a law is. Why in the hell should some people be exempt from the law? There is no reason for anyone to be exempt from laws. Unless they're an open platform, because then they're not the ones saying the stuff. But like I said before, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, and hell, even TikTok at this point, none of them qualify as open platforms because they are censoring people for saying things that are otherwise legal. And there could have been a really easy way for YouTube to have handled the whole adpocalypse thing. Really easy way of them handling it would have been for them to allow the people who buy the commercial time from them, the advertisers, to select what types of videos they want their advertisements on. And it could have been done by way of, the hashtags or, the meta labels, whatever, whatnot. And that could have been just all fine and dandy. Then, of course, have a punishment in place for people who are abusing the meta tags. Fair enough. Have it where the money's in escrow, and if the advertiser goes, "Hey, this video wasn't exactly what it said it was," then they go through, they review the video and see if it's about what it was about, and if they find that it wasn't about that subject and the meta tags were wrong, money gets taken back. Pretty simple, but effective. But also at the same time, I think that it's really stupid for a company to sit there and say, "Oh, we don't want to advertise to those people." Last time I checked, a company's main job is to make money. Best way of making money? Have as many clients as you can get. Well, kind of hard to get as many clients as you can get when you're saying, "I don't want those people as my client." Just like with, I forget what the name, there was a clothing company that sat there and said, "Look, we will never have plus size clothing. You can shop elsewhere." Now, the thing is, I thought it was stupid as far as a business move was concerned. And there were people that are all like, "Well, they have a certain image." I'm like, that's stupid. That's an absolutely stupid thing. But also they were a high-end thing, very overpriced clothing. Their margins are stupid high. So, alright, it's a specialty thing, just like with specialty cars, and there's an image that comes along with it. Alright, I can understand that might be some level of brand protection. Alright, fine. But you gotta admit, you're losing business if you're keeping people from seeing your advertisements. So that, to me, that's kind of stupid on a business level. But a lot, I've talked about it before, and it's a thing called moral bankruptcy. Now, a lot of people are talking, when I say moral bankruptcy, they think I mean that someone is morally bankrupt, as in they don't have morals. No, 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 no. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about businesses. I'm talking about a business that is willing to forego its responsibility or goals as a business to seem moral. And I'm like, what is the point of your business seeming moral if your business shuts down? If your business isn't making enough money to keep the lights on? Like, what is the point? I've never understood that. And it's actually kind of funny the more I think about it. And at that point, that's the business's self-censoring. Although I know that there were some businesses that were saying, hey, we don't agree with this. That was just the people that we paid to go ahead and advertise for us, and that's what they're saying, and they lumped us in with these other businesses. We have no problems being on any and all videos. And all right, I get it. That sort of stuff happens when you outsource something to someone. All right, you're not exactly in control of it. That's what you're paying them for. Okay, fair enough, because advertising's a big, big thing, and there's a lot that goes into it. I understand. But as soon as you notice that problem, it's time to go with someone who's willing to go along with your interests, as opposed to sticking with this other company that's trying to extort the people that you're trying to run advertisements on. You seem a lot more moral when you go that route than by sticking with a company that's doing something that you absolutely disagree with, is wrong, is shady, and is absolutely wrecking multiple people's livelihoods. You seem much more moral when you get away from that sort of stuff, even if it's the greedy thing to do. Being moral does not mean that you always sacrifice everything. You can be moral, you can show morals while doing what's best for you, personally. That doesn't negate it. Like, I understand, these people on YouTube that have made YouTube their career. I understand them, toning back on their stuff and, either dumbing it down or basically kind of self-censoring to avoid that nasty yellow button, because that thing spreads like herpes. It's all like, you get one video tagged with that, it's only a matter of time until your entire channel is just riddled with them. Even on videos that aren't on the same subject, and it was a one-time subject that you talked about because you thought it was important. Alright, I get it. I get those people doing that. Fair enough. But I really disagree with people going onto YouTube and searching up these people's really old videos from 5, 6, 7 years back and saying, oh, look, they said something that's wrong, that's considered wrong now, but was mainstream back then. They should have all their stuff canceled now. Wait, what? Why? So, are they saying that they still hold those opinions? And even if they do, why do you get to take away their livelihood just because you disagree with a personal statement that they made? Last time I checked, in the United States, at the very least, there's these things called anti-defamation laws. And with anti-defamation, one of the big things is if you lose someone their job by misrepresenting them, you can be sued. And I mean, I'm not one to get litigious. I'm really not. I am one of the Americans that does not think that the American pastime should be held in a courtroom. I really don't. I hate courtrooms. I despise courtrooms. The few times I've been in a courtroom, I'm all like, I would do just about anything to be anywhere other than here. But sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. And being an adult means you gotta do stuff that you don't necessarily find fun. It happens. Adulting sucks. But one of the biggest things that I've seen as far as censorship lately is it's censorship by fear. Fear of losing your job, fear of, not being able to make your house payment and losing your house, fear of not being able to buy food for the month. And those are all very valid fears. Very valid. Fully understand people being scared of that, especially nowadays, where you're seeing people getting their livelihoods taken away because of something that they said 13 years ago. It's all like, oh my God. I can understand people being scared. But that's also causing people to not voice their opinions, which does multiple things. One, it causes unpleasant surprises for people down the line, but then on top of it, when people are free to speak and voice their opinions openly, you very quickly get to see where the psychos are. It's a great warning mechanism, because if you're hearing someone talking about something and going, and saying some stuff that is just absolutely off the wall, hey, maybe I shouldn't be around this person very often because the shit's gonna hit the fan and it's going to spray all over me. So maybe get some distance. But if they're afraid to express themselves openly because of the aforementioned fears, among other things, including physical violence toward them, just for having said the wrong thing, then they're going to be quiet about it and you're not going to see it coming. Neither is anyone else around you. That's when you end up with school shootings. That's when you end up with people going into a random building, pulling out enough guns to make the U.S. military blush, and just going to town. The thing is you would be able to know that this stuff is coming down the pipeline if people are able to openly talk. But us censoring things stops us from getting that information. And it's whether it's hard censorship, like banning videos or banning accounts or, deleting Facebook posts, whatever, whatnot. You got the hardcore, and then you got the softcore, which I talked about before, which is, fear. It's fear-based. It's not being actively enforced, but it's being enforced enough. And that's where people are made examples of, where they go after the people that it's all like, yeah, this guy's way too big to fail. And then you see them go after this person and take them down. And it's all like, well, if they manage to take this person down, I don't stand a chance. So maybe toe the line. But like I said, it really adds a smokescreen for these people to hide behind that are the ones that you actually have to worry about. And I think that the reason why Trump is still so popular is because of the fact that he doesn't fear that. He doesn't have to. He has fuck you money. So it's all like, if he wants to, he can skip country at any given moment. No one's going to be able to do jack about it. He's got bank accounts all over the world. Good luck locking all those down before he's able to drain them. So, worst case scenario, moves to another country. Plenty of countries that'll welcome him because he got the money. But a lot of us don't have that. You got the working plebs, like me, that I don't have the option of just skipping to another country over the course of a couple of days. I'd have to go through a whole big old process and fight and claw my way out of here. Just because of the monetary burden alone, let alone, getting citizenship in another country or a green card or whatever. Doesn't matter. Because any of the countries that I want to go to right now are kind of locking down and going, hey, we really already have a problem with too many people having influxed into our country, and we're just having to clean up that mess to begin with. So, yeah. But I think people really like the fact that Trump is in a position where if he wants to, at any point, he can say what he feels needs to be said and not really have to fear it. That's something that a lot of us don't have. And I honestly do believe that's by design on a social level, but I'll get into that at another time. But we need to stop with the censorship. And we need to demand that the censorship be stopped. Or at the very least, there be consequences for said censorship. Like I said before, a lot of people say, oh, well, these businesses are private businesses. They can do what they want. But these people who are saying this currently tend to be the types that are also sitting there and saying that, prejudice equals privilege plus power. Well, I posit, if I'm going to be arguing on their terms, I posit that these companies have much more privileges than any individual because they have straight law exemption. But then on top of that, these people in these companies also have a lot of power. Even the governments acknowledge how much sway these companies have on elections, on sales trends, basically anything else in the business market, and in social trends. That's a lot of power. Compared to that, an individual has nothing. So why should these big companies that have and wield all this power be exempt from consequences, and us, the individuals, have to suffer the consequences of them not suffering consequences? In America, they constantly say, you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, if that's actually a right, then you should be liberated enough to be able to say what you want to say. Your life should not be put in danger because of people disagreeing with what you say. And you should not be hindered from pursuing happiness because of people labeling you. So I think it's about time that the U.S. government steps up and actually follows through with this. They need to either take away the open platform privileges of these companies. I know I've already said it multiple times in this stream. They either need to take away the open platform privileges, or they need to start demanding that these companies qualify as an open platform. And there needs to be regular checks on this. The reason why I say this is because these companies have grown exceedingly powerful. Just like I don't believe Google in America should be able to censor anything that isn't blatantly illegal, like child porn and all that. Alright? I agree that, yes, child pornography should not be widely distributed. It shouldn't be even narrowly distributed. It shouldn't be distributed even once. It shouldn't even be produced. But I use that as an example because very few, unfortunately, the number of people that will do this is growing, but very few people will argue against a statement saying, hey, pedophilia is wrong. And pedophilic materials should not be widely distributed. But Google should not be able to purposely bury information. They should not be able to manually go through and make changes to a logarithm and say, oh, yeah, no, this information is going to be on the 1050th page, even though the people typed in this word for word, but have a whole bunch of other stuff that we want you to know, that we want you to think ahead of it. I believe Google should have to be neutral with their search engine. And yes, it should be enforced. And if they are caught not being neutral, fine them. And fine them in a way to where it's actually going to hurt. I'm not talking, a million or so per infraction. Oh, no. I'm talking like 100 million per infraction. That would put a quick stop to it, or Google will go out of business within a year. Even though it's a multi-trillion-dollar corporation. In all honesty, I don't know if it's a multi-trillion, but it's at least in the high billions. So, thing is, at that point, with those sizes of numbers, doesn't really make much of a difference. But 100 million per infraction, well, at that point, they're going to stop all of a sudden having these quote-unquote rogue employees. Because they're going to start checking that stuff real fast. And they're going to have double checkers, making sure that that sort of thing doesn't happen. All of a sudden, they're going to have plenty of openings. And they're not going to have the limitations and all that. All of a sudden, it's just going to be just, oh, we're all about accuracy and da-da-da-da-da, we want to make sure that none of this ever happens again. Whereas right now, they have no reason to change. They have no reason to put in stopgaps for it. Because the thing is, they don't have competition. And if they're not going to have competition, they don't have any legitimate competition, I should say. Don't get me wrong, they got stuff like DuckDuckGo and all that going up against them, but in all honesty, how much of the network share does DuckDuckGo have? How much market share do they really have? Not much. A lot of people go with Google, one, because it's familiar, and two, because, it's a little bit simpler to use to a degree. Me, I use DuckDuckGo. I don't like using Google anymore because I've done plenty of experiments where I've compared the results that I get from DuckDuckGo versus the results that I get from Google. And Google always tends to put a political bent on anything, even when it comes to video games. Like if I'm researching something for information on a video game that I might want to play, yeah, all of a sudden, I've got a whole bunch of political stuff popping up on my screen. I'm all like, I don't care about people bitching and complaining in some forum about some political ramification that they perceive that this game is going to be having. I don't care about that. What I care about is, does this mechanic work this way? You know, the thing that I typed in. It's annoying to me. But then on top of it, it's always super left-leaning. I've never once seen Google go ahead and do something even remotely conservative when it comes to it. It's all like, they always represent the left, and then they never have any representation of the right other than the most batshit crazy stuff. And I'm like, come on, man. It's all like, at least do a good job of pretending. If you're going to pretend, at least be good at pretending. Come on, man. I'm done. I've never understood why Google does this. Now, I understand that, you know, some of their donors and investors and that sort of thing are very invested in the left gaining more power and that sort of thing. I get it. I understand that. But at the same time, it's all like, people are getting sick and tired of Google, and as soon as a viable replacement comes around that's actually going to be neutral, actually comes around, and is able to resist Google doing a hostile takeover of it, then Google's going to be screwed. Because people are going to be sitting there and going, hey, use this search engine. It's actually neutral. You can actually get the information that you're looking for and get accurate representation. Now, I know a lot of people on the left are going to stay with Google and go, well, I'm already getting all the information that I want. All right, have fun. Everyone else is going to move on to the new thing. Because everyone else wants to actually be educated on both sides of the argument. It's funny because at this point, I'm looking at conservatives and their arguments that they're making, and they've got a pre-made answer for just about everything that the left does. Because for one, I've noticed that the left has a lot of rhetoric. And that's the one thing that's not being censored, is the rhetoric. And I'm not just dogging on the left. There have been times where the right's been in this position, where it wasn't okay to say something that was left-leaning and all that sort of thing. But the big difference is the right didn't threaten to fire someone for disagreeing. You know, the conservatives were all like, you know what? I disagree with you, but your work ethic is more important than what you think. Now, I'm sure there have been a couple of instances where, you know, a conservative was all like, oh, you're one of those liberals that agrees with this? Oh, no. Then there's no place at this company for you. All right, I understand that that's happened, but it's not like people were sitting there and going online and going, yeah, I'm never going to go ahead and hire a person that thinks this way. Not like the left, where there have been videos of people sitting there and saying, after this is all over and your guy loses, we're going to remember who you are, and we're never going to, and we're going to go ahead and brand you, and you're going to be walking around with that scarlet letter the whole time, and da-da-da-da-da. You know, just the most threatening shit that you can think of in a capitalist society. And it's all like, really, dude? You think that is... that's an appropriate response to someone saying something that you disagree with? Like, come on. Like, there's got to be a limit. There absolutely has to be a limit there, and I don't understand. I've never understood why people are being like this. But it is what it is. So, I really want to see an end to the censorship so that way everyone can be as educated as they can be. So the people that we gotta watch out for can't fucking hide because they're all like, oh, well, I'm not allowed to say what I say, so I'm just gonna do what I'm gonna do. I would rather them talk smack first and give us some fair warning before whatever's gonna happen happens. And then on top of it, I want the censorship to stop because I want us to be able to continue moving forward as a society, as a country, as a species. Because the more we censor, the less progress we're ever going to make. There's a reason why we look down so hard on the on the Dark Ages. We always look down on it because it's all like, wow, I can only imagine being a part of a misery that bad born out of sheer ignorance. Ignorance that was forced onto people by an elite few. Well, we're going right back into it. Slowly but surely. The more we allow for censorship, the farther backward we go. And there's one last bit of censorship that I want to talk about before I wrap this up. And that is the censorship of revisionism. Now, I know a lot of people have bitched about revisionism and that sort of thing. And I agree. Revisionism sucks. It's a bad idea. It's disingenuous, dishonest, and an absolutely abhorrent practice. And there is no place in a free society for revisionism. At no point should you go ahead and be all like, oh, well, we've been teaching this. We have all the evidence for it. But we're going to go ahead and ignore that so that way we can make up history that more suits what we feel. Or that's not going to offend people. Or should I say, not offend the people that we want to protect. Because I don't see anyone arguing saying, oh, well, we should revise history to where slavery never happened in America. Oh, no, no, no. They want to keep that. But they want to revise the history that came before it, such as where the slaves came from, how they came to be enslaved, the fact that white people have been enslaved just as much as black people all throughout history, how just about every culture at some point in history has had slaves. You know? Just one example. But then also at the same time, they're wanting to take away accomplishments from people that are long dead to allow people nowadays who have been learning based off of the discoveries of these geniuses in the past. They want to allow these self-entitled little fuckers to go ahead and claim those accolades. No! A student that has just gotten their master's degree in math does not get to claim that they created algebra. No. And then you got people that are saying that we need to, quote unquote, decolonize science. Decolonize science? What the hell are you fucking talking about? Science is science. They're saying, well, it's from a white person's perspective. It's from a living being's perspective. You fucking morons. It has nothing to do with skin color. It has nothing to do with culture. Science is science. Science is cold and uncaring. Just like it doesn't give a shit about your feelings, it doesn't give a shit about your fucking culture. But then you hear these people that are sitting there saying, we should decolonize science. It's all like, what exactly do you mean by that? Oh, you mean stop learning the science that has allowed us to make all of our major breakthroughs throughout human history? You're talking about that science? What are you wanting to do? And then when you ask them that question, they deadpan look you in the eye and start quoting freaking magic and shit. And I'm all like, are you fucking kidding me? You want to explain lightning in the air as some god being pissed off up in the sky at another god that lives in the ground because the god in the ground mooned him. Are you serious? Really? Then how do you explain us having the power for lights? It's all like, they don't even go with, oh, a hamster's running really fast on a wheel. They don't even have the decency to go with something that's in the realms of absurd possibility. No, they're sitting there and saying that electricity is generated by water spirits. And anytime I listen to this stuff, it's all, I laugh because it's so absurd, but inside my soul is slowly withering away. Because I come to the realization that I am part of the same species as these motherfuckers. And that saddens me. Because at some point in the far past, me and them have shared some level of genetic connection. Even if they live all the way across the world and they're part of another culture that went a completely different fucking way from whatever cultures I came from, you go far enough back, common ancestors. And motherfucker, that pisses me off. And the reason why it pisses me off is because it's all like, only someone who is completely mentally deficient is going to come up with a concept such as revisionist history. History has already happened. History is ugly, especially when you're talking about human history. It's ugly, it's nasty, there was a lot of foul shit that happened. But what makes humans so special is that we learn from our history. And I've noticed that these people that are preaching the value of revisionist history are now literally arguing for the exact same things that Hitler, Mao, Stalin, all these major fucking dictators that killed hundreds of thousands of people in brutal, torturous ways. These motherfuckers are basically quoting them. And then when you bring that up, they then call you a Nazi or a supremacist, when they're the ones that are preaching supremacy and Nazism just under a different name. And where you're all like, no, you're quoting the stuff that we know now is absolutely wrong. We know how this ends. And then I always think about the quote of, those who do not know the past are doomed to repeat it. And it's like, motherfucker. So, like, that is becoming true. And I think that it's ironic in a special way on how true it is. I find it fascinating. Like, I forget which scientific group that it was, but there was a group of people that were going through and trolling the scientific community, quote unquote scientific. We're talking social sciences. But they were trolling the social science community by going through, and in one case, they basically were quoting, just straight up taking lines out of Mein Kampf. They slightly rearranged them, but the message was still the same. And they updated the vernacular and then submitted it. And it was accepted by several social science journals that are peer-reviewed. So that meant it wasn't just one person that agreed with this. It was multiple people that claimed to be specialists in this field. They said, yes, these are excellent ideas, and we should spread them far and wide. Now, anyone who's listening to this now or listening to it later, let that sink in. These people thought that Mein Kampf was full of good points and that we should enact these policies and that we should spread this way of thinking across the world. If that is not terrifying to people, or should I say, if that's not terrifying enough to people, the people that were thinking this are the ones that are typically in charge of what our children learn, of what is being taught in schools, the ones developing policy that limits parents' rights. That come up with what should be, quote unquote, social norms. People that are in charge of looking after other people's mental and emotional health. To me, that is a terrifying realization. Absolutely terrifying. Because when you think about it, these people not only have the ability to create a current mental army, but are also in a position to continuously refresh the troops with each generation in growing numbers, which also is passively giving them more and more sway in how our government is run. That is the reason why I say that schools should have to be, because they are funded by the government. Now, private schools are a different story. If they're not getting government funding and subsidies and all that, then they're on their own. They can go ahead and do what they want. They've proven that they can be full-fledged grown-ups, by all means. But any school that receives government subsidy and funding should be required to hire an equal number of teachers of a specific political bent. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we're not going to see the end of laws stating that you have to hire this many colored people, this many women, blah, 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 blah. We're not going to be seeing the end of this anytime soon. So I figure I'm okay with utilizing this as a weapon to use against what I am now considering an enemy. And that is, if we go ahead and can get enough teachers in a well-balanced environment to where the students are getting information from both sides and are able to make their own decisions, while putting protections in that keep the students from being retaliated against by said teachers, regardless of which side of the decision they come down on. We can start to heal the damage that this imbalance of power has done. And honestly, that is the most important place to start. Is our education system. Every other system, if we change it, it won't matter. Because the problem is just going to grow and persist. Strictly because of the imbalance of information that we have in our education system. And it's sad that I even have to say that, because our education system should never have an imbalance of information. It should have an overabundance of information. And another thing that we need to do is we need to start teaching true life skills in school and make those classes required. Every kid should have to take home ec. And in home ec, it shouldn't be just, cooking and sewing and that sort of thing. It should be how to balance a budget, how to apply for a job, how to go ahead and do that. Because when I got out of school, when I came out of high school, I had none of that knowledge from school. All of that knowledge came from my parents. I was not taught any of that in school at any point. And I'm not exactly a spring chicken. It's not like I graduated yesterday. Once students go to college, then that's their own prerogative. They're adults at that point, and I believe that they should be treated as adults. They should not be babied in college, and the colleges need to loosen their death grip that they have on the social situation going on those campuses. Especially because colleges are also partly funded by the state. So at that point, boom, right then and there, again, they should have to hire an equal number of faculty that is of a particular religious bent. So half of them conservative, half of them leftist. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of debates, but the best place to have debates is in school. That is my opinion, because that's where the truth comes out. And there should be no limitation on information that can be presented. Again, unless it runs afoul of the law. But you should not be ostracized or punished or anything like that for bringing evidence in school. And I don't care if you're talking, K through 10 or anything like that. K through 10, high school, or college. At no point should a student ever be kicked out of a class for presenting evidence supporting their argument. At no point, especially if it's coming from a reliable source, such as a independent study. Of course, an independent study that's been multi-peer reviewed and been able to be replicated and all that sort of thing. And the reason why I have to put that stipulation in is because the absolute falsity of vaccinations for kids causing autism was technically peer reviewed, but it was all people that had confirmation bias, and even the original person said, yeah, we didn't follow the scientific method in any way, shape, or form, and we actually didn't even find a real correlation, but that was our end goal, so we just said it was. And misrepresented the numbers, and misrepresented the breakdowns of the numbers. They even added a few numbers that weren't there in the beginning. That's a little bit farther than fudging some results. So, like I said, it's got to be replicated, multi-peer reviewed, all that sort of thing, before it's considered to be reliable. And the reason why I say that is because of the pure and simple fact that helps to avoid confirmation bias as much as possible. But again, that's going to be for another time. I might cover that in another live stream or a video or whatever, whenever I get around to it. But if we do not get this situation under control with the censorship, I'm calling it now. First off, we're going to have civil war after civil war after civil war, and we're going to rip ourselves apart as a country. 2, the continued censoring and expansion of censoring that I'm foreseeing coming is going to result in people voting in some fairly nasty individuals into power that are then going to begin to blatantly abuse people's rights, but continue to use the censorship to where not enough people are going to be able to sound the alarm in a big enough way, and it's going to turn into a bloody civil war that's not going to just be brother against brother, but it's going to be brother against government. Which the government would win in that situation, because if we're busy fighting amongst ourselves, then the government can easily come in and mop up whoever, quote unquote, wins. There's a reason why in video gaming it's called getting third-partied. And it's the worst fucking thing in the world, because you're the one that does all the fighting, and the third party is the one that gets all the benefit. Well, that's what the government's fixing to do. They want to be the third party. They want us to fight amongst each other, and then them be able to swoop in and sweep up all the power. So, I'm calling that. And that's one reason why the government hasn't really been interfering with the riots. It's because they know that that's going to happen, and eventually something is going to give. And it's going to end in the same way. It's just how we get there is going to be slightly different. One is that the leftists are going to push it too far, and they're going to start basically pulling some ISIS shit and start actively broadcasting them executing people in the street, which will definitely get the right's attention in a hurry, and the right will respond in kind. And let's just say this, the right, when you hear people talking about history and they talk about the sleeping dragon that Japan awoke, what they're talking about is the right. Because the right is the one that doesn't really do anything. It's pretty slothful as far as policies and all that is concerned. However, once it gets moving, it becomes a living nightmare. The right is the ones that are well fucking known for wanting to avoid conflict as much as possible. Like, they'll talk a big game, but usually their bark is much worse than their bite until you get them to bite in earnest. At which point, it's like a pit bull going after a chihuahua. Not going to end well. And the left will find itself on the receiving end of that. And they'll sit there and say, well, that came out of nowhere. No, it didn't. You've been trying to provoke the conservatives for well over 4 years now. And you finally got your reaction. Don't be surprised. Or two, and this one's probably the more likely, is all the damage and stuff is going to move outside of these liberal cities and that sort of thing. These liberals are going to get a little bit big for their britches, and they're going to start moving to rural areas. And once they start moving to the rural areas, it's only going to take a few times for the right to sit there and, again, pop their head up. Because earlier in the stream, I talked about what happened in Soviet Russia. Now, I'm going to do something that would definitely get my channel demonetized. I'm pretty sure I've somewhat spoken about this in the past, but I kind of censored it. Just out of respect for people, but at this point, fuck people and fuck people's feelings. In Soviet Russia, when it first started, there were a bunch of unemployed people, you know. A lot of them were, you know, in the culture of the time, drinking was a big thing, and so the men would end up basically go down and, just constantly be at the bar, constantly getting drunk, basically dealing with that depression in the most unhealthy ways possible. Repression and grumbling and bickering and pissing and whining and moaning while getting fucking drunk, making the feelings of inadequacy even larger, and feeding that self-deprecation that men are known for whenever we go into a deep depression. Well, people came walking in that were part of this new government, basically, and started telling these unemployed people that the people that were responsible for them being in such a state were the farmers who owned their own land and had been working their own land hard and had been profiting off of their crops. And that if it wasn't, and they basically said, well, if it wasn't for them doing that, you would have been completely successful, you would have been employed, you wouldn't be here feeling like shit. And it's all because these farmers stole from you because they profited off of something that you need. Well then, farmers, of course, hadn't stolen from anyone. They had worked hard for their money. Anyone who has worked on a farm, even for a month, will tell you that it is not easy work, and that it is actually very thankless work, because of the hours that you put in. Typically, you don't get even what would be considered to be minimum wage. That's the reason why a lot of countries subsidize their farms, is because of the fact that it's absolutely necessary, but the profit margins are so low that a farm would go under without subsidy, typically. And the bigger the farm, the worse pronounced that problem gets. So, these unemployed motherfuckers then followed these government agents to the farms, where they proceeded to break into the farmhouse, beat the men, tie up the men, and then force the men to watch as they violated their wives and daughters, and then beheaded their wives and daughters, and then beheaded the men. And this wasn't one or two farms. This was all across Soviet Russia. Well, this didn't exactly pan out great for the government, because now all the people that knew how to grow the food efficiently and properly were now dead, which led to widespread famine and hundreds of thousands of people starving to death. The exact numbers are unclear because of censorship. And if the information hadn't been being censored from the general populace by the Soviet Russian government, they would have known that it wasn't the farmers that led to their jobs being shut down. It was the communist government. So, of course, once these groups here start heading for the rural areas and start pulling their shit, well, one thing about the conservatives is they tend to not forget instances like that. And so they'll respond in the only way that makes sense, knowing that this has happened in the past, especially since the left has been leaning more and more towards communism and socialism. And history does have a way of repeating itself when it comes to people who refuse to learn from the past. And I'm sorry, the only way that you can believe that socialism and communism can actually work in the long term and not require constant blood sacrifice is if you are a person that does not know their history. And I am not even a history buff. In fact, I am quite horrible at history. And even I know this shit. It's funny. If I had been, making these arguments, making videos like this and all that when I was in high school, my history teachers would have been ecstatic. I have learned more history in the last 5 years of my life than I ever learned in high school, in grade school, both combined. Hell, even when I went to college for a little bit. These past 5 years, as I've started asking questions, ever since I actually woke up, I have learned so much more history, and it is absolutely terrifying. And I do not want us to repeat our history, because the history of mankind is nothing but suffering, misery, war, and death. We are living in a time right now where it is amazingly peaceful and prosperous. I would like to continue that trend. I would like the world to get even more peaceful and more prosperous. But the thing is, we have a bunch of powers right now that are working against that. Because the more peaceful and prosperous that the world gets, the more pronounced the power seekers get and the effects that they do, because people become complacent, and part of that complacency is gullibility, and it's gullibility through ignorance. The only way to fight ignorance is with information. And the only way to fight information is with censorship. So, of course, the people that wish for the general populace to remain ignorant are arguing for censorship. And unfortunately, those tend to be the type of people that want to seize power the most. And so we're seeing it. News station after news station after news station, social media companies, newspapers, everything right now. There's a reason why a lot of them are leaning farther and farther left, and why they're owned by people in the left. There's a reason why the vast majority of Hollywood leans left. Because that leftist direction that everything is taking serves the people that are currently in power, or the people that want more power. Because it always ends in ignorance. They don't care how many people die. They don't care how many people get hurt. They don't care the fact that they're arguing against basic human rights and constantly violating basic human rights. They do not care. As long as they can censor us, they can keep us in the dark, and as long as they can keep us in the dark, they can maintain some level of control. And now they've even gone ahead and been able to take over basically the social contract. They're at this point dictating the rules of the social contract, and anyone who does not sign on with it is now basically the new equivalent of a leper. I think that it's absolutely hilarious that we actually had a breakout of the plague, a case of the plague, which I consider a breakout because even one bit of the plague popping up, well, yeah, even one bit of the plague popping up, I consider a breakout because I everyone thought that the plague was dead, that it no longer existed. Apparently, we were wrong. But I think that it's funny that that actually happened in Southern California because they've been making lepers of people for a long time. And so it's only a matter of time until this censorship catches up fully with society and the ramifications become well known. But I've been going on for about 2.5 hours now, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to end the stream here. But to anyone who hears this, if you made it this far, thank you. I appreciate you dealing with me. I know that I was a little bit more rambly right now. Been a while since I slept, so you have tired me, and so that means you have scatterbrained me. But if you've made it this far, I want you to think about something. And that is, who does censorship really protect? Does it protect the innocent? Does it protect those who are trying to do what's right? Or does it protect the guilty who don't want you to hear about what they did? And does it protect the people that are trying to undermine your ability to perpetually move forward? Have yourselves a great day. I hope that you continue to further your knowledge of the world. Use alternative media. Find the ones that are doing the hard-hitting reporting. The ones that are reporting on instances that no other media, no major media sites are touching on. Of course, vet them. Make sure that what they're reporting is true. Any news report at this point needs to be taken with a grain of salt, and they need to have evidence of what they are claiming. But make sure to keep your eyes open, because in this time of censorship, we have to be more vigilant than ever, and we have to seek out the truth wherever it lies. Because if we stay in the dark for too long, eventually the things that we fear will come out of that dark. And then we'll have a much more pressing issue in front of us. I'll talk to you all later.